Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about what's happening in the economy in the United Kingdom because things are getting worse. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that back in October, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, announced her budget, and in that budget she only left herself £9.9 billion of headroom, which sounds like a lot, but when you compare that figure to the headroom that's been seen in every budget since 2010, which you can see on this chart, you can see that the 9.9 billion on the far right hand side here, shown by the green bar, was one of the lowest levels that any government had set itself. And of course, one of the other things that Rachel Reeves said at the time of the budget was that she wanted to balance the books. So that meant that all of the income that was coming in via tax had to balance off against all of the expenditure, so the government didn't want to take on any more borrowing. Now, the budget that Rachel Reeves had put together was based on the figures provided by the Government Office for Budget Responsibility team, and that's shown by the yellow line on this chart. You can see the forecast level of growth for 2025, 26, 27 and 28. Now, the Bank of England, which is the central bank in the UK and knows quite a lot about the economy, put together its own forecasts in November, 1 month after the budget was announced. And this is shown by the pink line on this chart. And you can see that that forecast was lower than the OBR forecasts. However, in February, the Bank of England revised its forecasts, which are shown by the black line, and you can see that there is now a significant divergence between the original OBR forecasts and the updated Bank of England forecast. And what this tells us is that it's very likely that the UK is now growing at a slower rate and will continue to grow at a slower rate for the next few years. And what that means is that Rachel Reeves and the UK government will receive less money in terms of tax revenue, and so they face two options now, either to cut back on spending or to increase taxes. And the latest estimate put together by a UK think tank is that the UK government is now £4.4 billion in the red compared to the fiscal rules that were set by Rachel Reeves in the budget back in October 24. And just to make matters worse, the GDP figures for January 25 have now been released, and they've come in significantly lower than everybody was expecting. This chart shows the month-on-month movement in gross domestic product for the UK for the past 12 months, and the scale on the right-hand side of this chart goes from 0.5% positive at the top to 0.2% negative at the bottom. And what this chart shows is that over the past 12 months, the UK economy has been struggling to achieve consistent growth, and in 6 of the last 12 months, it's actually seen a fall in GDP. And the most recent figures for January 25 show that GDP fell by 0.1%. And this was compared to the market expectation of growth of 0.1%. So that represents a 0.2% negative swing. And what this means is that the UK economy contracted in January, so companies are generating less profit, therefore they will be paying less tax, and that means less tax revenue for the UK government, and that's going to put even more pressure on Rachel Reeves and the government to be able to balance their books between the tax income and what they're spending. And in order to balance the books, the UK government has decided to cut back on the welfare system, and somewhat controversially, it's now targeting the health and disability benefits system. This chart shows the actual and forecast cost of the health and disability benefits system in the UK between 2024 and 2030. The UK tax year ends in April, so 23-24 is for the year to April 24. April 25 is shown as the first year of the forecasts, and then we've got 5 more years of forecasts. And what this chart shows is that in the year to April 25, the current year, it's forecast that the total amount spent by the UK government will come in at £75 billion. And as you can see, these bars have been split into 2 different categories. The light blue section at the bottom shows the cost for working age adults, and the dark blue bar at the top shows the cost for pensioners and children. And what this chart shows is that over the next 5 years, the total cost of health and disability benefits in the UK is forecast to rise from 75 billion to 100 billion. The 2 main constituent parts to health and disability benefits in the UK are personal independence payments and universal credit. And the government has now decided to change the eligibility criteria for both of these. Personal independence payments, also referred to as PIPs, are paid to more than 3.6 million people in the UK that have long-term physical or mental health disabilities that prevent them from working. PIP payments are split into two different categories: daily living payments, which are paid at a standard rate of £72.65 per week or an enhanced rate of £108.55 per week, and mobility payments, which are paid at a standard rate of £28.70 and an enhanced rate of £75.75. In order to qualify for PIP payments, a health professional has to undertake a questionnaire based on your ability to complete certain basic tasks. To qualify for the daily living payment, an individual is assessed on their ability to be able to do 10 different things, and these are prepare food, take nutrition, manage therapy or monitor a health condition, wash or bathe, manage their toilet needs or incontinence, dress and undress, communicate verbally, read and understand signs, symbols and words, engage with other people face to face, and make budgetary decisions. And the assessor ranks these from 0 to 12, with 0 being no difficulty whatsoever to 12 being impossible to achieve. And as an example of the point scoring system, if you need help to wash your hair and to wash below your waist, then you would score 2 points for that. However, if you need help to wash your hair below your waist and also your body between your shoulders, then you would score 4 points. And the new system that's been introduced by the government says that you have to score at least 4 points to qualify for this daily payment. So people who have scored less than 4 points historically will no longer qualify for these payments. And that's estimated to impact 1.2 million people and save the government £5 billion over the next 5 years. Universal credit is paid to more than 7 million people in the UK who are either out of work or on a low income to help them with their living costs. The basic level of universal credit is worth £393.45 per month to a single person over 25. However, if you have limited capacity to work because of a disability or long-term condition, this payment more than doubles because of an extra top-up worth £416.19 per month. However, under the government's new proposals, claimants will not be eligible to get this incapacity top-up until they are aged 22 or over. And new claimants will also see this top-up fall from £97 extra per week in 2025 to £50 per week in 2026. And in terms of how many people this change will affect, this chart shows a breakdown of the age of people claiming universal credit at the moment. And you can see that there are over 106,000 people aged between 18 and 21 who will now lose out on this additional payment. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video because we've been following what's been happening in the UK, and as we've been talking about, things are getting progressively worse. We are seeing the growth starting to slow down, and in January, as we talked about earlier, GDP actually fell into negative territory, so the economy contracted in January, which was against the forecast growth of 0.1%, and that was revised forecast growth. The OBR forecast from last summer was significantly greater than a fall of 0.1%. And what we are seeing here is a huge divergence from the original forecasts that were put together by the UK government when they set out their budget back in October 24. And what that means is that the amount of tax revenue that the government has been pulling in has fallen significantly below where they expected it to be. So that's leaving them short in terms of the cash in. And what that means is that they now face a very difficult decision. Do they increase taxes, which was something that they said they would definitely not do? They didn't want to increase any more taxes. Or do they cut spending? And what we've talked about in today's video is that even before the new budget on the 26th of March, the government has announced that it's cutting back on the welfare system. It's reducing the eligibility for various people to be able to claim disability benefits. Now, technically, that is just changing the rules of the game, moving the goalposts. But what it's doing is saving the UK government at least £5 billion. But as we saw earlier, the government is expected to be in the red around 4.4 billion at the moment. So that 5 billion, which actually doesn't come through until 5 years' time, it's around 1 billion per year over the next 5 years. that doesn't even balance the books. That still leaves the government 3.4 billion short, even if it had that whole 1 billion up front today, which obviously it doesn't, because it will take time for that benefit to feed through. So I think what we are seeing here is that the government has now worked out that it's got its calculations wrong. The budget didn't work back in October 24. So the amount of money that the UK government is pulling in is now declining. And this is putting real pressure on Rachel Reeves ahead of the 26th of March budget. Does she increase taxes and go against what Labour said? They said they wouldn't increase taxes. Or do they cut back on spending? Do they introduce some form of austerity programme? Either way, it's going to prove very unpopular with the people who voted them into power last summer. And what we're seeing in the UK at the moment is that we've got a third party rising. Historically, the vote has just been between Labour and Conservatives. There's been another party called the Liberal Democrats who try to come along and get involved, but are really the also-rans. But we are now seeing Nigel Farage, his party Reform UK, are coming to the forefront. They're gaining in popularity amongst opinion polls. And it will be interesting to see what happens over the course of the next couple of months. What happens with the budget, what changes Labour announce, and what that means in terms of their popularity and what Nigel Farage has to say about it. Because I think over the next couple of years, he's going to become more and more prominent. He's going to become a big part of UK politics. And it could be really interesting when it does come round to another general election, which won't be for another few years at least, whether we see a third genuine contender coming into play in the UK because of what's happening and the fact that people are going to have to pay more in taxes and we're going to see cuts to spending. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and thanks very much to everyone that's supporting me. If you bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, thank you so much for that support. Really means a lot to me, really helps to keep me going. And here's something to put a smile on your face.